The tool that I am going to present is something that I'm pretty new to. So I have a little bit less time, just FYI, and I may not be as skilled at answering the questions as some of my colleagues have been, but I'll do my best. My name is Julia Ogg. I'm a professor in the psychology department. I'm the director of the school psychology program over there. And I am going to share a couple of resources that I've recently used for online participation in survey-type studies. The broad platform that I've used is something called CloudResearch, and CloudResearch has several different functional services underneath it, and I haven't used all of them, but I'll speak to the ones that I have used. So the two that I've used are something called Connect and Engage, and they also can do more stuff like managing your research projects, and here's the website. But I'm going to jump first into the Connect platform. So I have used the Connect platform. I do a lot of studies with parents, and as a school psychologist, a lot of times I'm trying to recruit through the schools, and parents can be a pretty tough group to reach through the schools because, you got to get the school's approval, then you have to send things with kids home, and a lot of times it doesn't make it all the way to parents. And then also, depending on what you're studying, you may not want all your participants to come from one group or one school district where maybe they have a great parent initiative, or maybe they don't do a lot. If I'm asking about how the school connects with the parent participants, then if I'm in one district, I might get a lot of the same answers. And so a lot of times I want to get a little bit of a broader audience. And so I learned about the Connect platform. Actually, this is a funny story. I went to a conference. It was at the American Psychological Association, and somehow I stopped at their booth, which I feel like usually I try not to focus on the different booths, but I stopped and had a really engaging conversation and could see some of the benefit of their project. And then I had a colleague who had used them and had some success, and so we tried it out for a recent study. So basically what the platform is they have participants, a lot of people would call it a panel. They have individuals that they have recruited to be part of the Connect platform. Even in the time that I've kind of gotten to know them, it's gotten larger and larger over time. And when people sign up to do Connect, they enter some information about their age, things like if they have children, which is really relevant to my research. They have different professions, so I'll talk a little bit about that as well, and a variety of demographic factors. So if you use their services, you can basically go in and select on as many criteria as you want in terms of the industry that they work in, their demographics, what part of the country they come from. These are just some snapshots from their platform. When you create a project, you sort of go through these different steps, like talk about what type of project you're doing, and there's some basic information, so like the information that be shared with participants about what the study is on and see if they would want to participate. You can use a project link, so you can link to a lot of different platforms with Connect. So like in my research, I'm doing the actual survey questions on Qualtrics, and that links in a kind of a seamless way through the Connect platform. The cost piece is another part of it that can be helpful for researchers. If you are providing participant incentives, they will facilitate all of that. You put your funds into the platform, and then they distribute the funds. You never have to know people's names. They are all in there kind of with a code, and so they do all the payment, which is helpful. And then the participant targeting was the one thing here I wanted to focus on. This is where you might select, like in my research, I select parents of kids in 6th to 12th grade. I've done another study with teachers, so teachers of students in kindergarten to 1st grade, whatever you're looking for. And I feel like over time they've even created more categories for that. If there's any particular place, example here, where they should be located, if you are targeting different parts of the U.S. Any demographic, we tried to match the demographics to the broader demographics of teachers at certain grade levels, so you can indicate that. And you can also recruit people from other studies. And there's a lot of different things that you can select, like your prior studies. So the biggest benefit for me in doing survey research is recruitment of participants who can be more difficult to reach, so parents in particular, getting a broader sample of parents. The facilitation of the incentive distribution is also very helpful because that can take up a lot of time and documentation efforts, and it's kind of integrated, and I've been able to work with sponsored projects and show the documentation that I get, and they've been okay with that. The one last thing I wanted to show is just the platform itself is kind of easy and nice to use. This little screenshot right here just kind of gives you a summary of how many people have completed your study so far. You have a target number, and then it will stop when you get to that, so you're not oh gosh, now I got to pay all these extra participants. You actually have the opportunity to go in and approve. So if somebody didn't meet your criteria or they didn't really complete the survey, they could be not approved for payment. And then you have a completion rate, and then you have a bounce rate. So the bounce rate is basically, and this is a little bit higher, but sometimes that can happen with longer surveys. It's basically like people who went in and started the survey and then for whatever reason bounced out of it. They decided to stop taking it. Sometimes it can be, if it's longer, people will say, I don't have time for this right now, I'll come back to it. It could also be like, this isn't really what I thought it would be. In talking with the Connect platform on this particular study, it was probably a little bit longer than participants, even though we advertised this time that was very consistent with how long it actually took people. It was on the longer end for a lot of the surveys that are done on that platform. So that's one kind of negative, I would say, with it, because a lot of times our surveys are 30 minutes or more, and so there's people use this platform for industry and marketing and stuff, and so often their surveys might be a little bit shorter, and so the participants in those groups just might be a little less willing to do that. The other benefit I should mention there is that the data collection is very quick. So you can collect data, like in the study, this was within a couple of days that I was able to get 90 participants. So it's a pretty quick route, and you can embed your consent form and all of the things in it just as you normally would. The other tool that I've used on CloudResearch is a newer resource that they have developed called Engage. You can use it for surveys where you wouldn't link to like a Qualtrics. You can actually put quantitative questions right in there. But the main unique aspect of Engage is that you can do interviews, and they're AI-driven interviews. And so they can be done audio or via basically a chat. You train it to ask a certain question. So I have an example here, and this is just my preview and kind of how it worked with me. My initial STEM was for teachers of 6th to 8th grade students. Actually, we did students and teachers, so this would be a student one. We asked them, what is your biggest challenge to studying and learning? And so then they provide a response, and then the chatbot responds to the particular response that they provided. In this example, I think I had said, I never have enough time to study, and then the chatbot followed up with, can you identify any additional challenges to studying and learning that you face? And then the participant, which was me in this case, said, I feel like I study for hours, but I'm still not doing well on tests. And then this is how it responded. And so we test drove it a bunch of times to kind of get a sense of how well it did with the follow-up questions. In looking through the data we've now collected, we're good. I mean, in terms of really following up with the questions, what the person said. When we test drove it, what we did find is that sometimes it followed up too many times, and so we ended up, after practicing, we gave it an instruction, please don't follow up more than 3 times. Otherwise, it almost felt like this is too much. And so it did stop at 3 times in terms of the follow-up. We collected 6 open-ended questions from teachers and from students. I can't say tons about that because we're going through it now, but the data does look really interesting and relevant, and on the transcripts that I've read so far. Having done focus groups and interviews myself, I feel like the quality was good, especially given that it was collected in one day from about 115 people. The other tool that's available on Engage is that it will do some qualitative data analysis for you. I have a qualitative researcher on my team, and so we've kind of looked at it together. We're going to do our own coding and then kind of compare, because it's a little bit of a unknown exactly as to what it's doing. It's really more of a kind of accounting. I gave an example here. It kind of gives you this prominence score, but it doesn't give a lot of instruction of what that is, but it does sort of rank the themes that come up the most for each question. The most beneficial part of it, I think, is that it highlights and allows you to link directly to quotes that represent that theme. And so I think that part is helpful. And then it highlights how many participants in your sample touched on this. So in this particular theme, it looks like most participants, if we were to take averages here, had 3-ish things that related to this. Multiple quotes from one individual if they're relevant to the point. And then this does integrate with Connect, so I also use this to identify my participants and do the participant payment. So that is Connect and Engage. It's been really helpful to get a broad sample. One of the things that they're kind of their selling points in talking to them is that they suggest that the quality of their data is better than other things that do something similar like MTurk and Qualtrics panels. My colleagues who have used Qualtrics panels for some larger data collection have said they do feel like that has been the case. They felt like in Qualtrics panels they've gotten a lot of bots. Within this data, they do some checking for that, and we feel like the data has been a little bit higher quality. So that's one thing. I can't say a ton about it. It's a claim that they make, so I was just kind of commenting on my thoughts on that. And the other thing is their support is really, really strong. A Zoom call with them, like I'm having trouble setting this up, I can't get this to link. They have a lot of technical support. They'll give you a lot of suggestions. Like they didn't like some of the wording for the open-ended questions and gave some suggestions for that. So the support has been really good, and they have a lot of faculty researchers on their staff. So like I've worked a lot with somebody who's a social scientist, and she kind of gets it in terms of the questions that I have. So that's been helpful as well. The format of the transcript, so that is kind of with the data in general. It all goes into an Excel data sheet. The way that the conversations go, like the open-ended questions, in one cell, it puts everybody has the same first prompt. So it puts the first prompt, and then it puts every exchange. It's in one cell. You can tell who does it. Then there's a second column of data that has what everybody responded to the first question. I think the reason they do that, and this is actually a follow-up question I have to them, is just because that's the only one that's really comparable, because the other one, the follow-up questions are all different depending on what the participants said the first time. So that's kind of the way you get the data. So it's a little weird to read through it relative to other ways we get data. They're definitely still working on that, because I have given them a little bit of feedback on just some of the ways things export and the way that you can use like the close-ended questions. I think their goal is to make it more Qualtrics-like, but at this point the capacity is not quite as good. The question was whether it works with non-English language research. That is a great question that I don't know the answer to. I would be surprised if one of their information about their panel does not include that, and I would suspect that it does, but I do not know for sure because I have not tried that. But I could look at that and point you in the direction of somebody that would know. Yeah. The question was about the pricing. The pricing works for Connect. Typically, you can go on there and do quotes, and but typically the way the pricing at least has worked for me is that it's a 25% fee of your participant stipend. So if you're paying people $10, each participant would cost you $12.50, and that includes paying them and managing the survey itself. For Engage, I think they're in a phase of like it's sort of like a free to researchers, but they'll you have to pay for the participant fee. So I feel like that's changing over time. Most of my cost was associated with the participant. I think it was still at the 25% for Engage too. Do they contact people who are already registered? Yes. So that I think is how they can kind of ensure their quality. The first study I did, when we did teachers, we had some trouble filling some of our demographic, and so we had to expand and kind of remove some of those. This time, when I did one with parents, it was a little bit more broad, and I felt like it filled more quickly. So I feel like that's an area that they're kind of growing in, but that can definitely be a challenge if they don't have a group you're looking for. But I feel like they will answer, like if you say, like, this is the group I'm looking that I want to have in my study. They have given me feedback on that before, so you can always check in advance if there's a particular group you're targeting. How do they protect the quality of the participants and data? You have to set up an account with them. You have to have contact information that you could go through. You have to have, you have to report. You can't say, I have all of these jobs. So they have some of those things in there. And then I know they have bot and AI detection tools within them that kind of help, like if it looks like people are responding, like we had a few people on our Engage survey that looked like they were using AI to respond to AI questions, ironically, and they threw those out. So I think it's always a risk, but I feel like they have some good protections in terms of how they get people signed in and having to report on different characteristics that they meet. But I think it always could be a risk, yes. Your role in selection is indicating different demographics that you would look at. You can go through before they are approved for payment. You can go through and look at the data and see and make sure it makes sense. And I can say in the data that I have received, I've never gotten anything where I'm like, this seems way off. Whereas other surveys I've done, like on Facebook and things like that, I have gotten results that I'm like, I don't know about this. But I have the quality of my data and my very small sample has been good. In Connect, you use Qualtrics, so like in Qualtrics you can ask them to upload files and things like that. So yeah, I think you could ask them to upload those materials. Yeah, good question. I don't know if on Engage they have that capacity yet, but I kind of feel like it's sort of like you had mentioned, if you talk to them, they might be like, oh, maybe that's something we could build in. Yeah. Working with sponsored programs, I think asking a lot of questions up front is good, because I had a situation where I had funding from two sources, and one source told me that I could do like a research participants, what's it called, like a cash advance, like how we a lot of times pay people. They recommended that approach, and then SPA recommended them providing the funding through a purchase order to CloudResearch, and that takes a little bit longer, but that's what I did the last time. So I did a purchase order, and then the service was provided, and then the payment was. So I think just asking, I sent them an email up front. I said, like, this is exactly what I'll get in terms of showing participants are paid. These are the receipts that I can show you. Like, does that work? And they, like, CloudResearch gave me an example so I could show them before I did the study. And I'd be happy to help you with that too. But I've gotten a couple of different answers depending on what the funding source was for that.